and welcome to Get Booked. I'm Jennifer.
I'm Kate.
And we're here to talk about our Pride Bingo, which I did not bring. But it's Pride Month. Happy Pride. We have Pride Bingo all this month. So, our first square we're going to talk about is...
Historical fiction.
Surprise!
Because we love historical fiction.
We do. So, my first book is a YA historical, and before I talk about it, I want to give a quick little thing about historical fiction for YA. So, historical fiction isn't always, like, in general, it's what happens before you were born. So, when you're talking about young adult, like, the 1990s, historical fiction. 9/11, historical fiction. So, anything before, like, the 2000s, really, and a little bit beyond, because now we're in, like, 2021. So, like, 2002 and above is, like, realistic, and behind that is historical fiction.
So, like, more than 15 years ago.
Right.
Yeah.
Which makes me feel really old, because it just does.
Makes you feel old?
It does. But that's kind of the definition. So some of the things, like, you would think maybe the 1990s aren't really historical fiction, but for a teenager they are. Because they did not grow up in the 90s. So sad for them. I'm a 90s kid.
I'm an 80s kid.
So, okay, the first one I have is Lies We Tell Ourselves. So, historical fiction with an LGBTQ twist. This is by Robin Talley. She writes a lot of great LGBT books. Mary really likes her. This one is really interesting, though, because it's set in 1959 Virginia. Two girls are in school, and the girl who's the honor student at her old school is now put into the not-so-smart classes at her new school, and she's getting tormented, which is different. And she's being assigned a school, not school. So there's a school project, and she's forced to work with this other girl who's a different race. So you have a little bit of racism. You have, I mean, it's 1959. It's in Virginia, so you're talking about that a lot. But then you have the added twist of they're forced to work together, and then they start to become friends, and then they start to maybe have feelings, and oh my god, what do you do with that? Because that's a lot.
Especially in 1959.
Right. In Virginia. So.
In Virginia. Or anywhere, really.
Yes.
Yes.
So, that's Lies We Tell Ourselves.
I'm a big fan of historical romance, and Cat Sebastian writes a lot of historical romances with all different kinds of relationships that might even pass as a normal heterosexual relationship, but the woman likes to wear trousers. That's one. So I've read pretty much all of the books that have been published at this point. This one's called A Little Light Mischief, and it's actually a novella, so if you were curious, this would be a good one to try, because it won't take up much of your time. And so it's about, obviously, two ladies who fall in love and have a happily ever after. Lady's maid Molly Wilkins is done with thieving and cheating and stabbing and all the rest of it. She's determined to keep her hands to herself, so she really shouldn't be tempted to seduce her employer's prim and proper companion, Alice. But how can she resist when Alice can't seem to keep her eyes off Molly?
Interesting.
Yes.
I was thinking that was gonna be like the lady of the house. But
No.
it's not the lady.
It's not the lady of the house, yeah. And she's actually really good that way with class issues as well. She really understands that, you know, the demarcations and delineations of class in the era that she writes about. And that really enriches the books, because some things are more possible for some people than other people. So it's a delightful novella, and I think I would recommend it to anyone.
Nice. I have another historical romance. This is Olivia Waite, and it's called The Lady's Guide to Celestial Mechanics. And this has been on my to-read list for a while. I actually haven't gotten a chance to pick it up yet. But it's about a woman who has broken up with her ex-lover. He's about to get married.
No, her ex-lover is about to get married to a man.
Got it.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, because I did read this.
You did read this.
Yeah.
Sorry. Anyways, so she ends up helping the Countess of Moth translate some French astronomy texts. And they meet, and the sparks fly.
But do they have a future?
Oh,
Yeah. Yeah. It's good. It's good. So, probably a lot of you are familiar with the writer Diana Gabaldon. You've watched the Outlander series, possibly on TV. We have all seasons on DVD here at the library, so you can check that out if you don't want to invest in these books that are 600 pages long or 800 or 900 pages long. But she's also written a sub-series about Lord John Grey, who is the second son of a duke, and he is a military man in the British Army, and he has lots of different adventures, and there's, I think, 4 books about the adventures of Lord John Grey, and they're mysteries, but Lord John Grey is gay, and so one of the things he's always looking for is a relationship that is possible and safe, and so he has a so that's always a thread running through these novels, but this one is set in the year 1757. Lord John emerges from the Beefsteak Club. His mind is in turmoil. A nobleman and high-ranking officer in His Majesty's army, Grey has just witnessed something shocking, but his efforts to avoid a scandal that might destroy his family are interrupted by something still more urgent. The Crown appoints him to investigate the brutal murder of a comrade in arms who may have been a traitor.
Ooh.
Yes, so these are great. I know my husband loved all of these, so I recommend them to anyone.
Nice.
Yeah.
My last one is The Lions of Fifth Avenue. This is by Fiona Davis, and this has a dual timeline, dual narrative, and it's really fascinating because, so it's 1913, and I think it's Laura. Laura is looking for a little bit more in life. Her husband, actually, this is the fascinating part, her husband is a super at NYPL, and they have an apartment inside.
Yes, the New York Public Library had many apartments for the superintendent of the library buildings, and the reason why is that the furnaces had to be kept going with coal-fired furnaces in the day, and so they needed somebody on site who could fire up the furnace at 2 o'clock in the morning.
So it's fascinating because you get that kind of insider look at NYPL. And then the future one has, there's a woman who works at NYPL, and she's an archivist, and so that part is really neat too. But Laura's story, she wants a little bit something more out of life, and she decides that she's taking this journalism class because she wants to be a journalist. And during part of this class, she ends up in I can never say these things right. I'm going to ask you to say that because I'm terrible at that.
The Heterodox Club.
Yes. So that is a club where ladies are supporting ladies, and they're kind of bringing them all together and bringing them up and helping each other out, which was a club, a real club. And there Laura meets a special someone who kind of changes her whole view on things. And it's really fascinating. Things kind of go terribly wrong because life happens. But the way that the story is woven together, and like the future, not the future, but the present day and the past kind of are woven in, it's really good. I was fascinated by this book.
Cool. Cool. I really want to recommend The Gentleman's Guide to Vice and Virtue, which is another YA. It's historical. It's set in the I think it's like the 1760s or so. And what's really great about this book is that it is an adventure. It has got some fantasy elements to it, very like mild, but it's really there, especially at the end, at the climax. And it is a friendship story, and it is a love story. And so Henry Montague was born and bred to be a gentleman, but he was never one to be tamed. The finest boarding schools in England and the constant disapproval of his father haven't been able to curb any of his roguish passions, not for gambling, late nights spent with a bottle of spirits, or waking up in the arms of women or men. But as Monty embarks on his grand tour of Europe, his quest for a life filled with pleasure and vice is in danger of coming to an end. Not only does his father expect him to take over the family's estate upon his return, but Monty is also nursing an impossible crush on his best friend and traveling companion, Percy. Still, it isn't in Monty's nature to give up, even with his younger sister Felicity, and she is quite a character, and she has her own book in tow. He vows to make this year-long escapade one last hedonistic hurrah to flirt with Percy from Paris to Rome. But when one of Monty's reckless decisions turns their trip abroad into a harrowing manhunt that spans across Europe, it calls into question everything he knows, including his relationship with the boy he adores.
Ooh.
Yes, and it is a romp. We listened to it in the car as an audiobook. I highly recommend it. Very entertaining, a lot of fun. Monty is someone who is conflicted and not ready to, afraid to make a commitment. And by the end of the book, that's resolved.
Nice.
Yeah.
So there you have it, our first square checked off for Pride Month. We will see you next week with more Pride books.
Enjoy!